sea level rise, sedimentation actually affect this spawning, migration, primary productivity of the forest. And also change in the forest cover. This is a forest cover. The Sundarban was nearly 4 times bigger than in 1947. So these figures indicate the changes. The physical boundary are same. There is no human habitat, but the species composition and the water level and this larger tree are replaced by smaller stars. So these are the affecting this the natural environment of this forest. And also pollution is a big concern. The second largest port of Bangladesh, Mangla port, is very close to this mangrove forest, and also development, agriculture, also affecting this forest. And this picture is about recent oil pollution. This ships are with oil, and it's affecting the total mangrove ecosystems of this forest. Also, freshwater discharge. Many of us might know that there's a freshwater, though this is a salt forest, but freshwater is the lifeline of mangrove forest. So, due to impact in upstream country, the flow of fresh water is decreasing, which feed the mangrove forest. So, while freshwater from the upstream reduced to come into the forest, then the saline water from the sea they just move forward. So this changed the total ecological structure of the forest and affect this small scale fishery. This picture is about the flow of Ganges River, the main feeder of water to the mangrove forest. Another picture is showing this how the siltation make this river part of the river dry, which allow flow of water into the mangrove forest. And there are also economic drivers that this mangrove forest, in the impact zone, like 20 meters boundary of the forest, there are lots of economic activities, industrialization is going on, which directly affect this mangrove forest. Specifically, there is a now recent year, the government is trying to establish a thermal plant with coal power, on which there is a big, huge try to stop this. And also globalization and international market demand of mangrove fisheries product, especially this demand of live crab. This demand in the international market push the fishers to continue fishing, to harvest different fish, particularly in this breeding season, which is the demand is high for this. And these two pictures is showing that this, we know that the crab is there is certain rate, but nowadays fishers are reporting that the size of the crab is reducing, so they harvest the smaller one, which certainly affect the productivity. And the other picture is about using fine mesh net to collect shrimp fry, which is used for shrimp farming in the adjacent areas. So all of these activities are affecting the sustainability of the fisheries ecosystems. Also, there are different social factors like population pressure. Bangladesh is a densely populated country, and poverty and vulnerability, particularly this region is very much vulnerable to cyclone. It's a pathway of cyclone. So when cyclone strike, these people had to start from scratch. So as a last resort activity, when they lost their job on the land, like in agriculture, they usually go to the forest because it's open access forest. So this increased pressure on forest resource. And also there are traditional communities, they don't want to change their occupation. In any cases, they want to continue their occupation in the fishing. So this create pressure on the fisheries ecosystem of the forest. There are also concern about governance and policy issues which has a direct effect on the government is allowing the adjacent area of the mangrove forest for industrialization to convert the land into the agricultural land into shrimp farming and also industrialization. So to ensure food security and increase fish production, in Bangladesh government is allowing subsidies and incentive for aquaculture production. So this policy issue is certainly triggering the use of changing the land use pattern, addressing the mangrove forest. And also corruption and subjective insecurity, these are the authority, they usually charge more money for providing pass for fishing in the forest. So to compensate this loss, fishers usually put more pressure and more effort to catch fisheries from the forest. And so how these issues affect this fishery sustainability? We discuss about environmental, economic, social, and governmental policy. These issues also have ecological effects on small-scale fisheries. They could change this growth, survival, size, reproduction, recruitment pattern of the small-scale fisheries resources. Also degrade the habitat quality for fisheries resources, and also this overall they degrade the mangrove aquatic life. Also have a social effect of these activities, reduction in catch quality of food. Fishers spend more time in the forest, but they usually get less catch. And also the undersized fishing usually have less value for in the market, so they have to continue more fishing to get to further income. And food insecurity and malnutrition, usually fishers depends on their own catch for animal protein consumption. When they don't have catch, they have to sell. They have limited catch. They have to sell their product. They don't consume it by themselves. These are the also the wider society who depends on mangrove for their food security. They are affected by this. So these are reinforced one another. There are one affect their other one, the other one affect the next one, like this one. So what of these activities created for this sustainability of the fisheries ecosystems of the Sundarban mangrove forest? We argue that this create a social and ecological trap for the whole system. Different drivers like globalization, high demand of seafood international market, population growth, low cost fishing gear, they usually allow to increase the number of fishers. So increase number of fishers, they use increase number of fishing gears, and also use lots of illegal fishing gear, particularly the poison fishing, and also drying this mangrove canal to take all the fishes. Due to siltation, the tributaries are now drying out, so they can easily catch fish. And all these activities led to degradation of mangrove fisheries, so they usually get lower catch. So due to the situation, catch for immediate food, they particularly more dependent on the fisheries, so they have to catch more and more. So this is like something that for this their high fishing intensity, the resources are degraded, so they catch less fish. But for from the less catch, they usually get less income, so they continue to fishing more and more. So this is particularly created a social ecological trap in the mangrove fisheries of the Bangladesh Sundarban. So I would acknowledge to new project for inviting me to here, and also my university for allowing me to come here to present this work, and thank you all.
Thank you so much. I suggest that the questions that you may have for Mahmoud, you wait with them until the discussion afterwards. Thank you. The next speaker here is Ahmed Khan. And there's a lot one can say about Ahmed. He is now the Chief Fisheries Officer and Coordinator of the Blue Economy Flagship Program, part of the Feed Africa strategy at the African Development Bank. This expertise lies in fisheries economics, global seafood and value chains and coastal governance. His research outputs are available in journals such as bioeconomics, climate policy, fisheries research, marine policy, math and science. Ahmed.
Thanks, Ben. like my other colleagues, I'm equally privileged and honored to be here this morning and to talk to you about something that I've been very passionate about, which is food security. So, the African Development Bank had the Feed Africa strategy, which is one of 5 high priority areas in dealing with these development challenges and opportunities. And so I took up the appointment to implement the new flagship on fisheries. And in this presentation, I'll do my best to see how small-scale fisheries can be aligned and streamlined into these programs. I will talk about 3 things. I will talk about motivation and how that sits with transdisciplinary fishery sciences. And then I will introduce the Feed Africa strategy, which is one of the high fives. You can see the high fives. I think it's a bit blurry. So the high five, the Feed Africa strategy is the second high five. The first one is to power Africa. The third one is to integrate Africa. The fourth one is to industrialize, and the fifth one is to improve the quality of life of Africans. And so I'll talk about the Feed Africa strategy within the context of the blue economy. And what does the blue economy mean for Africans? The concept has been well perceived and received and conceived, but then what does it mean for poorer African countries who might not have what it takes to build their economies, and rich African countries who are actually at the forefront of this debate? And then I'll share with you some projects and partnerships, and I'll invite you to join me on this journey. Motivation. This is key. Transdisciplinary science is not an easy task. We often say it goes beyond the usual disciplines. We've seen a paradigm shift in fisheries. And we know what? Fish means different things to different people. For some, it's a species, and so you may need to do stock assessment to understand it. So you focus on conservation planning. For others, fish is a commodities business, big business. It's probably one of the largest business when it comes to imports and exports. And then for others, it's food. We're talking here about nutrition, quality of life, livelihoods, employment. So how do you package all of these in a curriculum? Or how do you share this with ministers of finance when we do have our annual meeting? So in this talk, I will emphasize on less of what motivates me, but more of who have motivated me and who keeps motivating me, and maybe this will motivate other people who are also interested in this line of work. But I'll talk about one thing, which is the missing elements. And I think some of you are familiar with the work that Sven has done. I happened to share this stage with him, and I thought maybe I can reflect upon his work and see how that has shaped mine and how it will influence the big challenge I have in implementing the blue economy framework within African countries. Sven introduced me to the word phronesis. When I was doing my PhD with Rapna, I was like, what's phronesis? He said, oh, you should read my paper. And I did. Actually, I read many of his papers at that time. But he also introduced me to his supervisor. And he told me, if you want to understand Newfoundland fisheries, you have to read this book. And I would suggest to you, if you haven't read it, it's one of the best social science books you can ever read. What this did to me was to put things in perspective. When you're dealing with fisheries, you're dealing with Feed Africa, you're dealing with issues around nutrition, around trade, around import, exports, value chains. It's a huge task. You're talking to multiple people. You have to convince them what is the relevance of what you bring in. And I think one of the bigger challenges I have in my job is that I have to convince people in terms of what is needed to be in their country strategy papers. So for instance, if you have $10 million per year or over 4 years, will you be happy to spend that on fisheries or on health or infrastructure? So this is where we are coming from. So how we highlight small-scale fisheries, how we pay attention to its importance goes a long way in making sure that it has the policy uptake. So the Feed Africa strategy has been developed from 2016 to 2025. It's got its own milestones. But the key features are that we're interested in extreme poverty, eliminate hunger and malnutrition, become a real net exporter of agricultural commodities, and including fishes as well as move up to the higher level in terms of value chains. I had another graph, a chart that I decided not to use, which sort of shows the global imports and exports of seafood, but I guess you know the picture. The amount of exports from Africa is really less. So the number of value chains that we have is not as high compared to Asia or Latin America or the Caribbean or Europe. So in defining these, there are some key operational priorities which I think I should talk about, and enabling conditions. So infrastructure is key. Governance is another. Technology and skills development, it goes together. So when you think about fish processing, for instance, there are so many local infrastructure for enhancing seafood processing, especially for dry fish. How can you get that done in a place like West Africa, where most people will eat bonga, dry fish? So those are the kind of challenges and some of the enabling conditions that we are looking into. And finally, partnership and gender. It's easier to share with you the contribution of small-scale fisheries using this chart. It gives you a good picture of the contribution of small-scale artisanal fisheries, inland fisheries, which is in green. I think it's a bit blurry. But you can see that in almost all the inland countries within the Great Lakes and rivers, seafood contributes to animal protein to most communities. On the coast, you can also see the contribution of artisanal fisheries in blue. So the only one country that stands out dominant in terms of industrial fisheries is Namibia. Some of the other ones like Mauritania, Morocco, Seychelles, South Africa also have a huge export industry, especially focusing on tuna. So if we have to enhance the contribution of small-scale fisheries, what do we do? I don't have to go through the statistics. You can see seafood produce the affordable, healthier protein compared to meat. It's part of regional trade, not just within the Great Lakes, as we've had earlier in the morning today, but also in terms of exports. Employment in places like Senegal, it accounts for up to 15% of the labor force. So if we have to do something about small-scale fisheries and align them to our development agenda, how do we do that within a blue economy framework? So those are the kind of questions I'm grappling with. So this is a conceptual framework that sort of operationalizes what I'm talking about. We're using the biodiversity, ecosystem services, and human well-being lens to understand the various goods and services that we can get from not just the ocean, but also from inland lakes and rivers. And we're focusing on two things. One is a sectoral approach, just focusing on fish as food. And here, we're interested in sustaining harvest from wild capture fisheries, boosting aquaculture and inland fishery production. And the second one is to reduce on post-harvest spoilage and to make sure that the value chains are well, robust enough to increase productivity. And the other approach is more holistic, more integrated, more cross-sectorial. And this involves other sectors like tourism, so integrated coastal zone management, marine spatial planning, and climate resilience. Climate resilience is key because the coastline is always a hotspot for disaster, especially with flooding and sea level rise. We also do have guiding principles that helps put things in context. So as I mentioned earlier, there has to be ownership, country ownership. We have to leverage the private sector as well, value addition, and a whole lot of other models that we have been employing. So what does it mean? It means if you were to embed the fish chain in a holistic framework within the coast, so it could be a rural area, it could be an urban area. In this particular context, I'm using Abidjan. This is where the bank's headquarters are. So that picture of Abidjan shows infrastructure in terms of bridge. It shows bridges, several bridges. It also reflects on the green space, as you can see. And Abidjan is situated within a lagoon. So there's a whole lot of activities happening in terms of protecting biodiversity. So the entry points could be blue carbon or EPSAs, ecologically biologically sensitive areas, marine protected areas, or it could be renewable energy. In some countries, some folks are interested in wind energy. So on the left-hand side, you have programs. On the right-hand side, you have processes. So seafood value chains, fiscal policy reforms. We talked about subsidies earlier on. And of course, you can only do that with enabling institutions and governance. So what does the bank do? We orchestrate, we design, and we replicate. So from project management, we also provide knowledge products. So this is part of a knowledge piece that I intend to finalize for the African Blue Economic Conference in Nairobi next month. So we do have two major lending programs. One focuses on medium-income countries, as you can see in green, and the other focuses on low-income countries, as you can see in gray. Now, the difference is with the medium-income countries, you can have access to private sector finance. Completely different. It comes with its own strings. So the string is that you should have a really good balance sheet, so you can get up to $10 to $30 million. With the ADF, the African Development Fund, as the second lending program, this one goes to the public sector. It doesn't have any interest rates, and the programs are quite good, and you're flexible to do whatever you want to do with it. So with these two, we hope that we can provide new programs within fisheries and aquaculture and other relevant blue economic programs. We also have some countries that are eligible for the blended program. So you can have both the AFDB funding, which is for private sector, and also have another, the ADF, for public sector programs. And we also have other funding streams like the Nigeria Trust Fund, which is also available for financing. Oh, zero, okay. So almost done. Yes, so what does the blue economy mean in terms of transdisciplinary science? As I explained earlier, I'm motivated to do this because there's a whole lot more to do. Coming from a disciplinary background, from biology to the economics to geographies and governance, I think it has inspired me to be here today and to share with you some of the work that I intend to do. But more so, I think this provides an opportunity to extend partnership opportunities to you. So if you have a project that you want to do on the continent, you need co-financing, or you need people to help develop the knowledge products, we're happy to work with you. Thank you.
I hate to have to enforce this strict rule on timing. It's so nice to listen to these presentations that I also forget myself. So Alicia is helping here to keep time. We do not have time for questions to this particular presentation now, but you can, of course, raise them when we are done with the presentations here. I hope we have time. The other thing that you should know is that what is common to all these presentations and these people are they've been closely associated with TBTI from the very beginning. So that's a nice thing also to emphasize here. The next speaker is Alicia, right? Yes, Alicia Said. Said. She has recently finished her postdoctoral fellow with a Too Big to Ignore group at the Memorial University of Newfoundland, Canada, and is now back in Europe working on Mediterranean small-scale fisheries with low-impact fisheries. That's the name of an organization, Low-Impact Fisheries Europe, focusing on EU fisheries, governance. Her research interests include the resource management, socioeconomic resilience, and sustainable livelihoods in the context of small-scale and sustainable fisheries. Alicia holds a PhD from the School of Anthropology and Conservation at the University of Kent in the UK, and she will soon join IFREMER as a postdoctoral fellow with the UMR AMUR in Brest in France. Alicia.
Thank you, Svein. Good morning, everyone. And hello to all of those who are following us from social media. I am very happy to be here today. As Svein said, I have recently finished a postdoctoral fellowship with TBTI, where I have gained so much knowledge, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity to be here as a TBTI member. Today I would like to share with you some thoughts about the situation of European small-scale fisheries. I think this is an important momentum which will kind of drive the whole thoughts about the conference, especially the culminating regional round-up discussions on Friday. So I hope to be able to share the perspective of the EU fisheries situation and present the realities of the EU small-scale fishing sector and the potential ways to frame the challenges and ways to transform the way that they are being researched and hopefully to influence the way that they are being governed. So yes, without further ado, I will start what I have to say. So by now I am most certain that we are all aware of these two major instruments, okay? We have heard of them this morning. Nicole has set an important platform for my talk today, because basically I will be speaking about these two major instruments in the context of EU. I believe that these two instruments are very important in the context of small-scale fisheries sustainability. I have to admit that when the guidelines came out in 2014, I was kind of very happy, but at the same time, I was a bit skeptic because of their voluntary nature. I was like, I used to work for the administration, and I conducted work also at the EU level, and I noticed that the term voluntary was going to be a bit of a challenge to influence national governments. And like when I went to my country, Malta, and showed the voluntary guidelines, they said, oh, but that's in the context of food security and poverty education. Small-scale fisheries don't have their problems in Malta. So I was kind of shocked about that approach. So in fact, in this talk, which is based on work which I am doing with Professor Ratana Shubhagdi, I am going to discuss the importance of these two instruments, not just the guidelines, but the alignment of these two guidelines. And I will do this by deploying some examples from the EU member states. So some statistics about the EU fisheries, small-scale fisheries. So they are quite important, okay? They form 80% of the fleet, and they contribute to around 2 billion euro of landings per year. So you can imagine their importance to the economies, okay, to the sustainability of their communities. So they are very important, especially in fishing-dependent areas. However, small-scale fisheries in Europe have been tormented by problems of policy misfits. Okay, wherever you look, there are problems related to quota issues, accessing quotas, accessing markets. Okay, there are problems related to the share of subsidies. Okay, recent studies show that small-scale fishers in Europe get around 10% of subsidies in the whole region. The rest are, of course, allocated to the large-scale sector. Of course, they compete for space, okay? They've been facing marginalization from their fishing grounds. And all of these factors are increasingly making the small-scale fishers vulnerable. We have situations, okay, where small-scale fishers are declining, okay, and they are aging. So there aren't enough young fishers to replace the small-scale fishing sector. We have more concentration of fishing rights into fewer hands, okay? And this is causing a problem for a big future for the sector. In fact, a recent study which is in press states that the small-scale fisheries in Europe have declined by 20% fleet, which equals to 30% of the employment. And this has happened around 18 EU member states. So the 20%, the 30% are the average, okay? It didn't happen in every member state. And basically, the studies show that most of the problems have been related due to the focus of the CFP, okay, the Common Fisheries Policy, on the ecological and the economic sustainability of the fleet. So if one were to map out these issues emanating from the Common Fisheries Policy and the Blue Growth Paradigm, one would note that there are kind of similar issues related to the neoliberal push, okay, so this rhetoric of efficiency, making the fleet more efficient, has led to issues of distributive injustice, something which Svein highlighted in his talk this morning. Issues of social justice are a big problem, okay, so even though fishers are not, in small-scale fisheries in the EU, are not facing issues of poverty, but they are surely facing issues of injustice. Also, these issues keep on happening, okay? They're better for quotas, and the fact that they have to coexist and compete for space. These things keep happening because they are not well represented in decision-making fora, okay? We have issues where leadership has problems of elite capture, okay? Advisory councils are not always representing fishers. Various studies show these issues. And of course, the other problem is that the needs of the coastal communities of fishermen have been delegated to the fisheries local action groups. So fisheries local action groups are local, okay, governance systems that do not have the power to influence the policies that affect the fishers. So they are incentives to create community-led local development, but it does not give them the power to influence change in the policies that matter to the fishers. And like if we were to look at the studies related to these issues, we have problems related to resilience, okay, instabilities, impacts emanating from policy, fisheries policy, the failure of fisheries policy and governance to represent small-scale fishers, and the recent study which shows the concentration of quotas, okay, the issue in the UK, but of course it's everywhere. It's in Spain, it's in Malta, it's in France, so the problem is everywhere. And of course the blue growth, okay, the problem of fishers becoming ever increasingly marginalized from their space. However, after the negative part, there is, I think there is some hope. There is some hope because although when one looks at the situation, one would realize that the policy maybe has not, the policymakers didn't have the small-scale fishers as a priority. Now, with these two major instruments, the SDGs and the SSF guidelines, we kind of have a better hope of acting, okay, to change things. Both these instruments, okay, are important for sustainability because they have sustainability at heart. So they are both focused around engendering sustainability. So together they kind of can be used as the blueprint to shape the trajectories, okay? And who mentioned the human rights-based approach, which is something which is at the heart of the small-scale fisheries guidelines. However, before we start thinking about the trajectories, I think there are three important factors that we need to look at. Firstly, that SDG 14B, which states that we need to provide access to fishers, to resources, to fisheries opportunities and markets, is only one of the targets in the context of small-scale fisheries sustainability. And This is because the sustainability of small-scale fisheries, as Nicole highlighted this morning, depends on more of the goals, okay? Be it reduce inequalities. Yes, reduce inequalities is important, because if we are going to speak about giving access to quotas, then we need to reduce the problem of inequalities. If one were to dig deep within the instruments of small-scale fisheries, okay, and the problem, the small-scale fisheries and the guidelines and the Sustainable Development Goals, one would realize that there is a lot of commonalities, okay? So the guidelines speak to most of the different goals, okay? I will not go into each and every one of the rows, but this shows that the guidelines speak to poverty, decent work, and to economic growth, and vice versa. So, of course, for such transformation, we need to look at both the trade-offs, okay? So how are we going to implement economic growth in parallel to community sustainability, okay? So we need to recognize that there are trade-offs to look at. There are also synergies, okay? So if you increase the sustainability of small-scale fisheries, then you have a ready-made solution for low-impact fisheries, which is important for marine resources, okay? And also the actions toward sustainable development goals. These actions, okay, which I see as a very important concept of this conference, is the need to inform research through a transdisciplinarity lens, okay, because sustainability issues, as we saw in the big matrix, okay, they are interconnected. So to capture the root of the problem, we need to have a local context-based approach to understand the problem. So we need to broaden the perspective and conduct empirical research to inform context-specific governance. Just quickly, these are ideas, okay? I would like your thoughts about this. These are ideas of governance shifts that could take place at EU level. So how to improve access to fisheries and resources, okay? Market innovation and community resilience. How to increase legitimacy and participatory governance, okay? How to improve the role of regional advisory councils, and to assess how governance is working, and also incentivizing the small-scale fishers' contribution to economic growth, something which Wayne mentioned important this morning. We have a tendency to look at small-scale fisheries as something of the past, as something that is dying off, but of course we should look at the contribution that it can give to the future. So these are take-home notes, or take to the conference notes, so we can have a discussion throughout the conference and the discussion later. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alicia. No time for questions. I do think she pointed out an important point in the context of the sustainable development goals. When we talk about small-scale fisheries, we are, of course, not just talking about life on the water. We are talking about life on the water and by the water. And I think it is important to emphasize that. If not, they may easily be forgotten. Anyway, next speaker here is Maria Jose. Please take the stand, and I will check what they have written about you here. I could, of course, improvise my own presentation. I have known her for many years. But here's what it says here. Maria Jose Barragan Palladines obtained a PhD in geography at Memorial University of Newfoundland in St. John's, Canada. Her undergraduate and master's research at the Technical University of Munich focused on marine protected areas and marine wildlife management. Her PhD research employed the interactive governance approach with a specific focus on MPAs, examining the governability of the Galapagos Marine Reserve. She collaborates with TBTI and is a postdoctoral researcher in the development and knowledge sociology at the Leibniz Center for Tropical Marine Research in Bremen, Germany. Her research interests include small-scale fisheries sustainability, fishing community viability, food security from the marine perspective, and marine resource governance. Maria Jose?
Thank you very much, Sven. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Very briefly to say that I'm very glad and feel honored to attend and present this global scale major event in small-scale fisheries. This presentation is structured in 3 time-related schemes that the fisheries resources and their meanings have been constructed and deconstructed in the last centuries. Contemporary images of fisheries generally are being shaped and their rationalities associated to the scientific and non-scientific knowledge, but this was not the case. For instance, in the late Middle Ages, when the ocean and its creatures were imagined as devilish shapes that threatened the spiritual and corporeal human well-being. After these times, and despite the relevance of fish under the food security context, some societies continue looking at fish and fisheries as an occupation of last resort, and it could be said that this meaning still remains valid until our days. I argue that no one cannot study fisheries without some appreciation for the historical and cultural significance of the human communities who make a living from fisheries. And this picture invites us to reflect on how power and knowledge have shaped our current meaning and meaning-making about fishing and fisheries, since the articulation of the various meanings of fish from the global and from not global north and global south perspective. It could be then fair to say that this encounter represents a collision of meanings and a shift in the comprehension of this as an inherited body of knowledge. My presentation addresses the notion of development imposed in the Latin American and the Caribbean context, and is inspired by the trans and interdisciplinary perspective, desire to be implemented and research in fisheries from various standpoints. This framework addressing my presentation looked at the development notion, and it takes a critical approach to this notion from many scholars in the region. And I propose and suggest to look at the alternative epistemological notion coming from the South in terms of looking at Southern-born worldviews, when we paradigm as one example of that, and as a shared principles between many stakeholders. Transdisciplinary, taken as a complexity and heterogeneity way to look at science and problem and society organization, and recognizing that the knowledge production is characterized by hybridity, non-linearity, complexity, and reflexibility. Transdisciplinary then is the way to contribute to deal with real-world topics, by generating knowledge, addressing societal problems, and into bridging the gap between knowledge derived from research and decision-making process in societies. I now invite you to see or reflect on how the colonial and imperial powers in the late 15th century, by using geostrategic mechanisms, led to fortune and succeed conquering and appropriating land, sea, and their resources, fisheries included, in order to execute their power globally. In 1492, the Castilian and Aragon kingdoms, unified under the dominant Catholic discourse, supported the enterprise that took Christopher Columbus to the journey that transformed the world. What at that time was called the Descubrimiento, discovery, became a strategic movement for one imperial power to dominate the known world at that time. This story then is presented in 3 acts: fisheries resource application, use of fisheries resource, regulation, and economic benefits from fisheries resource management. These quotes illustrate how and to what extent the conquering and colonization of the Americas were used to disregard previous governance practices and knowledge of fish and seafood through illegal instruments put in place by the most powerful sectors of the societies at that time. Highlighted are keywords that I wanted to recall in terms of prohibition and granting rights of use of those resources. And they can be, these can be tracked as one of the first written evidence and references of some quota-based fisheries management and ban models. However, in later centuries, colonial powers, and this time integrating Spain, Portugal, UK, and England, used and paid more attention to the strategic geopolitics position of Latin America and promoted and motivated and financed organized overseas travels, which produced significant contributions to the development of the scientific agendas at the European scale, being some of these important names and key names in the development of this creation of power, being Alexander von Humboldt, one of the most well-known examples of that, and of course Charles Darwin, who visited Galapagos Islands and created a new conceptual and contested term at that time of basal evolution by natural selection of species. The development discourse is the second act that I would like to present, and is framed into the 50s and 60s ideals of development created at that time, paying attention on the post-war World War II conflict and based on an ID model for development, where agricultural activities were promoted as an incentive of agrarian age and primary economy using timber, fish, banana exploitation after an oil industry based in Latin America and very early and young democracies, an economy based on a capital model of accumulation. The development notion was coined and imposed in the entire region by, for instance, paying attention and highlighting the shrimp farming and agriculture initiatives along the region and the new political trends based on a growth idea. The conservation narratives is the third act that I would like to highlight, and is based in the inspiration promoted by this nature and wilderness kind of notion of natural protection, inspired by these images very common at attracting to customers to the wild and nature-based destination for tourism enterprises. After that, the creation and production of scientific material and scientific research along the region, promoted by also the conservationist movements, created and highlighted the importance and significance of conservation in some hotspots of biodiversity along the entire continent. Databases creation, mapping, geopositioning of list-based data lists, and databases for diversity of flora and fauna taxonomy components and directed the attention and attracted interest of researchers along the region. Objects and conservation objects and flag species were also used to promote and create areas where, in this case, mangrove users and mangrove activities were controlled. Protected areas were no doubt one of the major ages and along these decades for fisheries and fishing activities to be set and to be kept apart from access from users. So the closure-based preservation model imposed in the 19th and early 2000s along the region identified priority areas for conservation by protecting and closing them. The marine areas establishing promoted that the sustainability paradigm were boosted, but also it implied that changing marine resources access from traditional purposes took the format of restriction, marginalization, and exclusion from community members. Fisheries currently remain under the hard science loop, and this is one of the main images that currently are created under the fisheries sector dimension. We argue that currently we have still this background and this inherited reliance upon one single way of knowledge driven by positivist and scientific and technological form of knowledge production and creation. In summary, a wrap up, we go from the 15th century when the conquering of Latin America in Americas and the settlement processes taking place in the 60s, going through the shrimp revolution farming in the 70s and 80s, through conservation initiatives dealing with some political driven processes, and to the 2000s when grassroots movements were arising and the forced migration and displacement of communities along the coast areas, until the peace-building processes would take place in 2010 in some regions around South America, until the now updated political shift from the left in the last decade to a new wing-right area is also taking a very significant role in how fishing and fisheries activities are being shaped. Where are we? We have been told that decision and policy making should be done based on sound scientific evidence, and it may be useful to open the dialogue and discussion to what kind of science are we talking about, and we want and we need. Maybe by opening the door to other ways of knowing traditional knowledge, for instance, of local fisheries in terms of regulation or self-regulation would help, and it would enable the integration of diverse epistemological formats that can provide us with lights to understand local realities and local views. We are still reliant on technology and science, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it's important to recognize that it could also welcome other ways of creating knowledge, and only having few getting benefit doesn't really solve the problem. Having inclusive processes and activities involving many stakeholders and recognizing that fishing communities are still making a living of their activity may give us a response or a way to better understand the current status of the sector, which is, for instance, small-scale fisheries remaining still as invisible, marginalized, and poor sector of the society, an aging population facing problems to recruit a new generation of fishers in the future, competing with other sectors or shifting to tourism initiatives as the panacea for them to pursue. Where are we now concerning these hot topics? Ocean grabbing is a major issue threatening the sustainability of fisheries in long scale, and also the SDGs as one strategic political narrative that is being negotiated among these global state and members of the diversity of circles. But the conservation and sustainable use and human dimensions for sustainability are major elements that we need to pay attention to, as well as the SDGs that focus on human population as a critical aspect for conservation, paying attention to small-scale fisheries as a major actor at this stage. Other ways of knowledge should be paid attention to as well, and the role power and knowledge production and share is playing and regulating and governing the fishing resources. So which is or should be the role of science, I believe, is an important aspect to pay attention to. Critical at this stage is the consumer side and the market role in addressing fisheries aspect and threats. And this side of the equation and the human rights perspective may need to provoke our research endeavor in the future. In principle, there is no reason to claim that the consumers, for instance, is an homogeneous sector and therefore could be treated as one single well-educated customer will solve the problem. Differences take place, and Latin America is not the exception concerning market and customers based on the clear division between the wealthy and non-wealthy sectors. The plurality of the consumption society and the consumers, customers, citizens are fundamental in achieving and creating a new and improved image of small-scale fisheries through a smart governance approach. How to get there? Ways forward. Negotiation and the guiding principles. In a recent publication, I had the honor to go over with my colleagues. We highlighted how the human rights and dignity, respecting cultures, discrimination, gender, equity, rule of law, accountability, economic but also social responsibility are major principles that would be desired to be in an homogeneous standpoint for every single actor involved with small-scale fisheries at this point. So the search for scientific basis for confronting problems of social policy is bound to fail because of the nature of these problems. These are weak problems, whereas science has developed to deal with tame problems. Policy problems cannot be definitely described nor solved. Moreover, in a pluralistic society, there is nothing like an undisputable truth, and there is no objective definition of equity. Therefore, policies that respond to social problems cannot be meaningfully correct or false, and it makes no sense to talk about optimal solutions to social problems unless severe qualifications are imposed first. Even worse, there are no solutions in the sense of definitive and objective answers. Therefore, we need to negotiate. Development still is a contestable growth-grounded notion, and alternatives to that notion are needed. Comprehensive policies and practices as well, and one-fits-all concept needs to be revisited not only by research but also by policy. Competing claims of knowledge and power need to be recognized as key elements in this notion, and not only what development, but even more important, post-development are we targeting. With this picture, I just want to leave you a thought that I took led by one of the then publications or comments on how small-scale fisheries is not only an important economic sector, an important historical and cultural asset in our communities, but it's also a way of life. And this should motivate our understanding of that as one of our major, important, and valuable aspects of our diverse Latin America. I thank all the institutions that make possible my presence here today, especially to NOR, and I thank you all for your attention.
Thank you so much, Maria Jose. Unfortunately, we are out of time. There will be no time for discussion, at least now. And the reason is not that these people have exceeded their time, but because we've started late. So that's a lesson for other sessions. It's important that we start when we're supposed to start, or else we will not have time for discussion. But it has been a wonderful thing to be part of this session. It reminds me again that the world of fisheries is rich. That there is something that is unique to small-scale fisheries wherever you are, culturally, socially, ecologically, but that there are also some issues that are shared, that are common. And we saw that in these presentations. The same kind of issues came up, same kind of conceptualizations came up, which is important to take notice of, because it does make sense, therefore, to have that global perspective on small-scale fisheries that TBTI is advancing. So with those words, I wish you all the best for a happy lunch, and remember, be on time next time. Thank you.
Don't go, please. Just stay.
Would you bear with us for just a few more minutes?
Sure.
Join us celebrating Spain's career, or should I say, ongoing career. So we just have a few words to say to Spain, following this opportunity that we have right on the stage. And maybe we should have him stand up. Please allow me to say a few words. There are several things I admire Spain for. One obvious thing is he's a foundation of wisdom. He even looks like a guru. Complete with his white beard and his honey voice. He published over 25 books. I think he published almost something like 25 papers in marine policy alone. And I'm sure it wouldn't surprise me if he has worked in 25 countries. So that's one. Secondly, he really has an unwavering support for younger generation of fisheries scholars. A professor in his department once told me that Svein never gives up on his students. And so he's persistent, he's most patient, and the professor's name is actually Jan Torgersen, if you would like to know who gave you a positive appraisal. And thirdly, probably to me the biggest impression of him is he exudes authority, but not by claiming authority. He's extremely gentle, his humbleness, and he's also very passionate. He also encourages us to be a critical thinker, and he even encourages us to be critical of his own thoughts. And so I can speak for all of us that we're very grateful to have you as a role model, and we're happy that you are still going strong. Yes, and we will have you around. So I just wanted to say that.
This is quite unexpected and a bit overwhelming. I would ask Andrew to have it all in writing afterwards. Oh, Mahmoud would also want to say. This is almost too much. There will be no lunch.
This one you need to turn off.
I was very much lucky
but they're off,
to meet
this one.
Zvenyantov
And
during
that
my
just
study
those
at the
working
Norwegian
now.
College of Fisheries Science.
Because they're like
The first time I met him, I can clearly remember we were going home by bus. He was standing and I had one of my colleagues with me and he was smiling with her. So I was asking who is he and she told me that he's a very big scientist but maintained very low profile. So when I was thinking that I have to do my MS research, so I think that I should go for him. So during my thesis semester I had smaller time than my peers because I had some problems. So that time I have just only 3 months, maybe for 6 months semester. So I just working my thesis and went to him, he just corrected something like this and he again begged to me to do this. And I was thinking that he was such a big scientist and I am in such a trouble, he could write something for me for this thesis. And I was a bit frustrated, but after completing this 3 months and we two were getting like the topmost grade from my batch, and he told me that you are not built this thesis, but this is also built you. So this is my like long-term like lesson from him. And from 2007 to till now, he provided lots of support for me. And his support, I would say, is instrumental for my career, research career. And he's very much young, energetic in mind, and always smiling, very quick to reply email. So I think I wish like long life and energetic life for him in future. And I believe that his contribution is still not finished for small-scale fisheries. Small-scale fisheries need him for longer perspectives. Thanks, Dave, for all of your cooperation for me.
Is this going to continue?
Yeah.
I just want to say very, very shortly. Thank you very much, Sven, for inspiring us to follow this path. I really appreciate your generosity along these years.
I think I captured some of my thoughts on my slide about the things that Sven has highlighted in his career that sort of helps us do things differently. The one thing is the community. I like that paper, the links, the missing links. He has also written a lot on power, empowerment, co-management. The list goes on. Thanks, Ben.
One last word from me, although you are not my true mentor, you are not my lecturer, but reading your papers and reading your work, it was like I was sitting in that lecture room, because the way you deliver the message from your work, it's really inspiring. And I remember I used to request all the papers that Sven had on ResearchGate, and then when we met in Amsterdam, it's like, send me emails, don't use ResearchGate, because it's too much for you to do the social media thing. So thanks so much, Sven, for that.
Lunch.
On behalf of TBTI, we will present you Friends of Small Scale Fisheries at TBTI Hero.
yeah. Can you proceed here or another session?
In a small well, I have one for tomorrow in this room, and then one this afternoon in a small room.
That's not a question. Our presentation for the session in the afternoon. Bring it
To the room where you
to the room.
presented half an hour before.
Half an hour before. So, and same for what will be uploaded for tomorrow for this room.